Does Luka Doncic have a ball hog problem?
I don't know.
Although Luka Doncic has been one of the best players in the NBA, his team in the Dallas Mavericks haven't necessarily been the most successful when it came down to playoff time. And there could be a couple of potential reasons for the lack of success for the Mavs, but at this point some people are starting to point their fingers at Luka Doncic himself. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. As soon as Luka Doncic was drafted, it was very apparent that this guy was going to be special. He was a guy who came to the NBA from overseas, playing with professionals for a large part of his life. And that experience that he got from the EuroLeague clearly paid dividends as Luka transitioned to the NBA very well right away. He was showing a great understanding of basketball by not only knowing where he needed to be out there in order to score for himself, but also knew where his teammates needed to be out there in order to get them easy looks. And after his rookie season, he averaged 21 points per game on 42% shooting from the field, 7.8 rebounds on 6 assists per game. And after his rookie season, it was very apparent that this guy was special. And the great thing about Luka is he never looked back from there. Season after season following that, Luka just continued to get better and better until eventually he got to the point where he's at this season, where he's technically having the best statistical season of his career. This year, Luka's averaging an incredible 32 points per game on 49% shooting from the field, 8.7 rebounds on 8.1 assists. Just absolutely mind-boggling numbers, and numbers that would clearly make him a top 5 player in the league. But at this point, we all know that Luka's special. The real question now is, why are the Mavs as a team not having all that much success in the playoffs? Because it's not like it's only an issue this season where they're not all that good, or an issue last season where they didn't have all that much success. It's been something that's been happening for a decent amount of time now. And in my opinion, I think there's a couple different explanations for it. The first reason that I want to touch upon is a lack of depth around Luka. Now, ever since Luka was drafted, the Mavs always had some decent players around him, but it was never enough. It seemed like each and every season, the story was always the same with the Mavs. When Luka was out there in the court, the Mavs were one of the best teams in the NBA, but when Luka came out of the game, the Mavs just were never able to either hold the lead if they had one, or if they were down, they were never able to cut into it. It seemed like Luka needed to be out there at all times for the Mavs to have any sort of success. That was something that the Mavs were struggling with as soon as Luka was drafted, but even at this point, 5 seasons later, the Mavs are still struggling with the same issue. So it's pretty clear that the Mavs need to do a much better job at bringing in more depth to this roster. Now, the next reason that I want to touch upon is coaching. Now, over the years, it seemed like it was just a Luka Doncic show. The Mavs would just give Luka the ball and he would do whatever he wants out there, either to score for himself or score for others. And the fact that the Mavs are able to make the playoffs each and every season, in my opinion, just shows how truly special Luka is. But at the end of the day, once it comes down to playoff time, and especially in the clutch time in the playoffs, the fact that the Mavs never truly ran plays to get easy shots for other guys, or even Luka Doncic himself, really had a negative effect on the team and just made it so much more difficult for the Mavs to get easy buckets. And I really do think the lack of good coaching played a negative role in the playoff success, or lack thereof, of the Mavericks over the years. But the next reason that I want to touch upon, and the main reason why I'm making this video, is some people are starting to point to Luka Doncic as being the problem, and the fact that he has the ball in his hands way too much. And a huge reason why a lot of people are starting to have this mindset is when you look at the Mavs, they actually did have 2 stars in the past they brought for Luka. The first one was Kristaps Porzingis, and the second one was Kyrie Irving, who's currently on the team now. Now, focusing on KP, I think there was a couple different reasons for why that didn't work out, and I don't necessarily think it was Luka's fault. I think the real reason why KP and Luka didn't work out together is just due to the fact that KP was getting injured too much, and once it came down to playoff time, he just wasn't the same player. Whether that was because of injuries, whether that was because of confidence, it doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, KP didn't show up when he needed to. And yeah, you can definitely make the argument that maybe KP lost some confidence because Luka has the ball in his hands all the time, and maybe he didn't get as many opportunities as he was used to getting in New York, but at the end of the day, I still do think the blame would probably be on KP, just due to the fact fact that he wasn't playing well individually. So I do honestly think that's a huge reason for why those two didn't work together, and I don't necessarily blame Luka for that. Now, talking about the Kyrie Irving situation, I feel somewhat similarly to this as well. Originally, when the Mavs traded for Kyrie, I instantly didn't like the move at all. Both of these guys, in Kyrie and Luka, both need the ball in their hands at really all times to be successful. And although Kyrie is a much better player off ball than Luka is, both of them still need the ball, obviously. So I didn't think it would work out between these two guys, and I thought at the very best, they would have a situation similar to what they had in Houston a couple years back, which was an I go, you go kind of situation, but never really had a great flowing offense. I thought the Mavs at best would be in that sort of situation, but I never thought they would have a well-flowing offense. And just to clarify, what I mean by this is I thought the Mavs at the very best could have a similar looking offense, not necessarily a similar amount of success, because obviously those Rockets teams were very successful. And although it has been somewhat of a small sample size between these two men, we haven't necessarily seen the most success from them, and honestly they've even gotten worse from where they were before the trade. So although the Mavs have brought in two different stars for Luka, I do think it isn't necessarily Luka's fault for why it hasn't panned out. Now obviously this season isn't over yet, the Mavs still could make the play-in game, and if they make the play-in game they can have success, who knows what can happen from here, but just talking about at this current moment at the time of recording, it's not necessarily looking all that good for the Mavs. Now although I don't think it's Luka's fault for the lack of success between him and other stars in Dallas, I do at the same time think there is some legitimacy to that argument. And what I mean by this is although the Mavs have brought in a couple different stars that didn't pan out and I didn't think it was Luka's fault, let's be honest, when you look at Luka's game, it's very clear that he needs the ball in his hands 100% of the time to be effective. And when you're talking about potentially bringing in other stars either via free agency or via the trade market, it then becomes very difficult because if you're a star in the NBA, you most likely need the ball in your hands to be effective. So putting in another guy that needs the ball in their hands alongside with Luka just isn't going to work out, let's just be honest. And I think a perfect example of this is Kyrie Irving and Luka, and see how they're playing together this season. So I do think it puts the Mavs in a very difficult position because if there's a player that becomes disgruntled and wants to trade out of whatever team he's on, a team like the Mavericks would then need to assess whether or not that player would fit in well with Luka, and most of the stars in the NBA wouldn't, let's just be honest, so it puts them in a bad spot. Or even if a player in free agency wants to come to Dallas, if he's not going to work with Luka, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. And in my opinion, the only quote-unquote star that would work with Luka would either be a 4 or a 5. Ideally, a player that has a really nice three-point jump shot as well. I think, for example, a guy like Anthony Davis is a perfect pairing as well. But obviously, the Mavs would need to trade a ton to get a guy like AD, and they've already traded away a ton in the past. They probably don't have the assets to get him, and who knows if the Lakers would even want to trade Anthony Davis. So overall, the lack of playoff success for Dallas isn't necessarily only Luka's fault, but at the same time, I do think there is some legitimacy to the argument that Luka's ball-dominant playstyle does hinder the Mavs. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Luka Doncic has a ball hog problem, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.